When people think about the XPS, the first thing that probably comes to mind is the design, and honestly, Dell hasn't lost its touch. I still think this is one of the best looking window laptops that you can get on the market today. The CNC aluminum chassis feels incredibly solid, the diamond cut edges are super clean, and there's basically no flex anywhere on the machine. If we're just talking about the build quality, I would put it up right there with a MacBook. One small detail I absolutely love about this machine is the branding. Dell finally treats XPS as its own premium line. Instead of the big circular Dell logo, you now just get the XPS logo sitting proudly on the lid. It is cleaner and it gives the laptop a stronger identity. But is this enough for XPS to win users back, or just another pretty laptop? Well, let's find out about that in today's video. Hi, welcome back to ThinkView and my name is V. Let's get this video started. What I most appreciate about this year's XPS is that Dell finally stopped chasing the design over the expense of usability. Take the touchpad for example. Last year's generation, it was completely hidden. It looked futuristic, sure, but half the time I didn't even know where the touchpad actually ended. This year, Dell added two subtle lines along the edges. It's such a tiny change that most people probably won't even notice it, but after using it for a few days, you will immediately appreciate it. Your fingers naturally knows where the touchpad starts and stops. And speaking of the touchpad, it still's excellent. The haptic feedback is responsive, tracking is incredibly accurate, and palm rejection works so well that you completely forgot it's there. While I would still say Apple's trackpad has a slightly more satisfying click feel, but Dell is honestly very close. The keyboard is another thing that surprised me. I wasn't a huge fan of the gapless design when I first tried it, but after a couple of weeks, it really grew on me. The keys feel soft, quiet, and comfortable for long typing sessions. Dell even made the power button slightly stiffer, so you don't accidentally press it while reaching for the delete. My only complaint is still the arrows keys. They're tiny, especially the ups and down keys. And I wish Dell would just copy the inverted T layout that almost everyone else uses. Another welcome change is the function row. Thankfully, Dell got rid of those capacitive touch buttons and brought back the physical keys. Honestly, I never understood why laptops needed touch buttons for things like escape, brightness, or volume. These are the keys you press without thinking, so physical buttons just make more sense. One thing that has really surprised me in this year model is the weight. My review unit comes in at around 1.3 kilograms, which is noticeably lighter than the previous generation. Put the two side by side, you can immediately feel the difference. It's thinner, more compact, and somehow even feels smaller in the hand of a 13-inch MacBook Air. Connectivity though, it's still a mixed bag. You get 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and personally, I think this is perfectly fine. They all support charging, display outputs, and 40 Gbps data transfer. And because they're split across both sides, charging the laptop is always convenient. I've seen quite a few people asking why Dell didn't move to the Thunderbolt 5, but honestly, I don't think that's a big issue. The Core Ultra X7 355 doesn't natively support the Thunderbolt 5, and Dell is clearly saving it for its workstation lineup. If there's something that's worth complaining about, it's actually this. Dell removed the USB-C dongle from the box. Last generation, you got the HDMI and the USB-A included. This year, it's all gone. And while we're talking about these small annoyances, I still don't understand why Dell still refused to add a lip on the opening lid. MacBooks have one, Lenovo has one. They make opening the laptop with one hand effortless. The XPS still keeps the front light edge perfectly flat because it looks cleaner. It does look nice, but every time I try to opening it with one hand, I'm reminded that Dell's still choosing aesthetics over practicality in this one area. And the last thing I want to mention about this year's design is the speaker. I honestly didn't expect much because Dell hides them completely underneath the keyboard, but after using them for a while, they are surprisingly good. They're loud, punchy, and have much stronger bass than I expected. For YouTube, Netflix, or Spotify, they are generally enjoyable. Compared to the MacBook Pro 14, Apple still wins in clarity and overall soundstage, especially at high volumes, but Dell tuned these speakers differently. Instead of chasing studio accuracy, they sound more energetic and fun, and honestly, I think most people will actually prefer that. Moving on to the display, this is probably my favorite part of this laptop. My review units come with the Dell's new 2.8K Tandem OLED panel, and it looks fantastic. Colors are vibrant, blacks are perfectly deep, contrast is exactly what you expect from the OLED, and Dell also did a really nice job with the anti-reflective coating. Another thing I appreciate is the touch layer itself. Some OLED touchscreen have this faint green pattern that becomes visible on bright backgrounds. Dell completely avoids that here, so the display looks much cleaner. If you mostly work indoors, whether it's at home or in the office, I honestly don't have much thing to complain about. Sadly, the only weakness is the brightness. I honestly expect more for a laptop in this price range. Most premium tandem OLED displays today can reach close to 1000 nits, while the XPS sits at around 400 nits in SDR and roughly 500 nits in HDR. Now, I understand why Dell made that decision. Lower brightness mean lower power consumption, which help the battery life. But when you place it next to something like a MacBook Pro, especially outdoors or inside a bright cafe, the difference is immediately obvious. If Dell can push this panel close to 800 or even 1000 nits next year, I genuinely think it would be one of the best laptop display on the market. Now, let's talk about the webcam. On paper, Dell absolutely wins. You get a 4K HDR camera, while the MacBook Pro still sticks with the full HD. But once you actually join a video call, things become a little more complicated. The hardware is excellent, the software, not that much. While balance can be inconsistent, AI processing sometimes pushes skin tones too red, and every now and then you'll probably find yourself opening Dell software just to make yourself look normal. Meanwhile, the MacBook simply works. Opening the lid, join the meeting, and you're done. And I think that's a pretty good summary of the Dell versus Apple in general. Dell builds incredible hardware, but Apple still delivers more polished experience out of the box. Moving on to the performance, I actually think that Dell made one of the smartest decisions for this year's XPS. If you remember the previous generation, Dell tried squeezing an RTX 4050 into an incredibly thin chassis. On paper, that sounds great, but in reality, the GPU was so power limited that it never came close to performing like a proper RTX 4050. The laptop wasn't really powerful enough for creators, but it also sacrificed battery life and thermals compared to a true ultrabook. It kind of sat awkwardly in the middle. This year, Dell seems to accept that. Instead of chasing specifications, they focus on the balance. There's no longer a dedicated GPU option, which obviously means giving up a lot of graphic performance, but in return, you get a machine that is lighter, quieter, runs much cooler, and lasts significantly longer battery. Well, whether that's right decisions or not, it's really dependent on the user you are. My review units come with the Intel Core Ultra X7 355, paired with the Intel's new Z3 integrated graphics. Looking at the specifications alone, it doesn't sound particularly exciting. But after using this laptop for nearly a month, I think Dell has picked the right processor for this laptop. For the kind of work that most people do every day, like dozens of Chrome tabs, Word, Excel's, team meetings, Photoshop, Lightroom, even some light 4K video editing, the experience is generally excellent. Everything opens instantly, multitasking feels effortless, and the laptop never really feels like it's struggling. Honestly, that's exactly what I expect from the premium ultrabook. I don't need it to break the benchmark records, I just need it to feel fast every single day, and this year XPS is really delivering that. Of course, there's still some limits. If your workflow revolves around Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Blender, or anything heavily dependent on GPU acceleration, this probably isn't the laptop for you. The CPU itself is perfectly capable, but the integrated graphics simply can't compete with the dedicated GPUs or the Apple high-end chips in sustained creative workloads. Rendering videos takes noticeably longer, complex timelines become harder to scrub through smoothly, and once you start adding heavy effects or working with 3D scenes, you can definitely feel where the XPS reach its limits. It's not a bad performer by any means, it just isn't designed for that kind of works. Well, on the bright side is that this laptop is probably the coolest and the quietest XPS I've ever used, because the whole processor only draws about 30 watts under heavy loads, that fans become noticeably quieter. During normal office work, web browsing or watching YouTube, they're practically silent. Even when exporting videos or running benchmarks, the fan noise stays surprisingly controlled. The keyboards only get slightly warm, the palm rests remain comfortable, and you can actually use the laptop on your lap without feeling like it's turning to a space heater. After using plenty of thin and light laptops that constantly spin their fans up and down, I really appreciate how refined this XPS feels. Battery life is probably one of the most biggest upgrades this year, and honestly, it's the feature I appreciated the most. Dell switched to a new silicone carbon battery, which offers much higher energy density than before. That allows the battery to become both smaller and lighter while still maintaining the same 70-watt capacity. In real-world use, the improvements is immediately noticeable. During my normal workflow, mostly Chrome, Office apps, Photoshops, or plenty of meetings, the laptop comfortably lasted an entire workdays without making me think about the charger. It still doesn't quite reach MacBook level battery life, but compared to the previous XPS generations, it's a huge step forward. For the first time in a long while, I actually feel comfortable leaving the charger at home and still got to work at the cafe or in the office. Looking inside the laptop, Dell actually made a few smart engineering decisions. The cooling system is clean and straightforward with dual fans and large heat pipe. That's more than enough for this processor. One detail I particularly like is that the USB-C ports are modular. If one port ever fails, Dell can replace that individual module instead of replacing the entire motherboard, which could save a lot of repair costs later. As for the memories, it's still soldered, which is expected for the laptop this thin. Personally, I would love to see Dell adopt CAM2 memory, but the upside is that this LPDDR5X memories runs incredibly fast. That extra bandwidth helps both the integrated graphics and on-device AI workloads perform noticeably better. After spending nearly a month with this XPS, I think Dell has finally figured out what this laptop is supposed to be. Instead of trying to compete with gaming laptops or creative machines, they focus on making one of the best premium ultrabook. It is lighter than before, quieter than before, battery life is dramatically better, and perhaps most importantly, it is simply much nicer to use every single day. So, would I recommend this to you? Well, it would really depend on what you're looking for. If your priority is getting the most performance for your money, or spend hours every day editing videos, rendering in Blender, or gaming, then honestly, there are better options. Something like a MacBook Pro or a Zephyrus G14, or even Dell's own workstation lineup will give you significantly more horsepower for these workloads. But I don't think that's who this laptop trying to compete with. If what you want is a premium window laptops that feel special every time you open the lid, that's beautifully built, incredible, portable, quiet, reliable, and simply gets out of your way while you work, then I think Dell is finally back on the right track. They fixed most of the complaints people had with the previous generation without sacrificing what made the XPS so iconic in the first place. Is it perfect? No, I still wish the display is much lighter, more ports, and has a proper notch for the opening lid. But compared with the previous generation, this feels much more of a complete laptop. So, that's my experience after using this laptop for a month. I would love to know what you think. If you had around $2,000 for your next laptop, would you choose this XPS or would you still stick with the MacBook Pro? And if you like this review, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to ThinkView, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!